Hello everyone and welcome to episode 16 of the NC podcast. This is Dennis, like usual, starting off solo for today, but I'm not gonna be solo for long as Gab is gonna hop on any minute now. Uh, so I will take my time starting off with the usual stuff that I didn't have the time to actually mention uh, last time out with Tito on the show. And that is, of course, if you like what you see, like and subscribe here. It is free, it doesn't cost you a thing. Uh, then, of course, uh, if you ignore my dog, then, of course, you can find the show on Spotify for when you are on commute, for when you are working out, wanting to have something in the background. The episodes go up like normal, bar some specials like the game analysis I did a while ago now uh, for one of the Olympiacos Panathinaikos basketball games. Everything else, like normal, goes up on Spotify a few hours after. The show is on uh, Instagram and Twitter, of course, both getting another massive surge of support uh, recently, and I'm honestly very, very grateful for all the support the show has seen, honestly. And I'm just gonna keep doing my best for this brand to grow and for this brand to actually grow alongside you all, listening to this, supporting the show, giving honestly your all to this show as much as me, even more than me sometimes. So yeah, of course, quicker updates and much uh, thoughts while the match is happening and everything like that will be found solely on Twitter. But I am putting in as much of an effort as I possibly can to keep quick updates coming on Insta. Uh, on Insta as well, actually. Now, aside that, the show is on TikTok as well. It's not that active. I do want to try and plan stuff within the off season for TikTok to get as regular posts as Instagram and Twitter get, or even semi regular as Instagram and Twitter get, like one or two a week at least. I've been trying to post some stuff, but I am having some trouble with TikTok pushing said post out. So if any of you can help with that, it would be very much appreciated. Uh, Now, before I do get into the basketball, uh, I do have an announcement to make, and that's that on the day that this is being recorded, uh, which is Thursday, tomorrow I won't be active anywhere. I'm usually active on Twitter, especially interacting with everyone sincerely in the morning. Uh, but tomorrow I won't be active anywhere for most of the day, given I need to be at the doctor's for a while. So I will update, of course, on my health and also how this show's programming will be affected given what I learn. Uh, because there is a slight possibility that I will need to go in for a surgery, but not the time to talk about that. The, the time to talk about that will be tomorrow. but I know for sure. Now, if you give me a second. Now, uh, while I am waiting for Gav to join, I will touch on basketball a bit. Of course, Olympiacos picking up the victory against Panathinaikos yesterday in Oaka in relatively convincing fashion, let's say, with the lead being up to even plus 15 at some point. Of course, got to point out that the job is nowhere near done yet. Uh, the job still has a long time to go, of course. I joked about us sweeping Panathinaikos, but we all know that that's not going to be a very likely possibility. Uh, Panathinaikos honestly woke up very late. They were out of the game for around, I'd say for around uh, 3.5 quarters. I think they did have a resurgence or maybe even just come alive in the last 3 to 5 minutes of the game, of course. Nan and Lucas in those games completely just refuse in those minutes. Uh, Completely just refused to mix, honestly. Nan ending up with 21, 6, and 3, and Lucas ending up with 16 on 5. Uh, but aside that, honestly, uh, I have to, as ironic as this may sound, I have to call it a Barjoka's masterclass. Uh, because you just have to all around give props for yesterday's performances. Of course, Lesor was nowhere near what Lesor usually is. Uh, Milutinov showed that when he is healthy, there is no problem of absence about anyone else. Milutinov, of course, ending up with a 12, 13, and 3, nearly having a double double in the first half, uh, which is honestly crazy. But yeah, also have to point out the incredible performance that Thomas Walker had. I'd say once again silencing the people that keep on doubting him and doubting him and doubting him in general, uh, and just showed some people that some comments are absolutely pointless. Uh, Goes, you have to point out his incredible all-around performance, honestly, uh, both defensively and offensively, more than solid. Uh, then, of course, Captain ending up with 11, 7, and 1. Shaq just, I'm enjoying Shaq silencing each and every one of the people, along with Ghost, of course, silencing each and every single one of the people that said they shouldn't be here next year. Uh, and honestly, Shaq paging, I think the best, uh, what's it called? The best comparison that you can give is Shaq aging like a perfect wine. And every time he sees green, he just goes absolutely insane. Petrushev doing what he had to when he had to, ending up with 13 minutes of play. Peter solid as well, and that's about it uh, for the big props that needed to be given for yesterday. Isaiah with another relatively mediocre game. Larazaki is doing what he needed to when he needed to, and Tanulis Lujasen Nas with did not play registered. So yeah, of course, now also gaining the home field advantage, uh, which will play a huge part in this series, especially if we do manage to convert and gain the two 0 victories. Uh, so yeah, time will tell. Time will honestly tell. Uh, Another thing before getting into the football transfer talk, like you all asked, another thing that, in my opinion, as I've said always, we shouldn't forget about any department of this wonderful organization. Let me actually get Gav in here. Hello, hello.
What's up, man? How you doing?
I can't. Okay, I can hear you.
Oh,
I can
okay.
hear you now.
Awesome.
How's everything, man? How are you doing?
Good. I feel like I'm recovered from whatever I had last week, so that's
Yeah,
definitely
I'm
better. I'm
very
sure I
happy
sound
to hear
better as
that.
well.
Finally getting some sleep in for the both of us also, which is
Yeah.
extremely important.
Getting over the hangover of last week.
Uh, I was just covering about the loss today. Handball finals are now 1-1 against AEK. We lost 25-23, which I think is the exact score that we won the first game. Uh, didn't actually watch the game, so I don't have a lot to say. I just wanted to cover that up. Uh, let's get into the main point of this episode, shall we?
Absolutely. We got a lot to talk about.
Hectic summer. We're gonna see a very hectic summer. Let me actually pull up. You give your first thoughts, and let me actually pull up the squad that I haven't for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's been some encouraging preliminary news coming out. Obviously, Kostas Tolakis signing a 3-year contract that he probably was the most important re-sign just because of how young he is and how much potential he has um, to make Olympiacos a lot of money at some point. Obviously, we hope that he stays here for the next few seasons. I think it was a really mature decision by him. I posted about that on Twitter a few days ago. You know, guys like Mavropanos, guys like Solis, even Retsos to an extent, making a move too early and losing some good years in their early 20s, either injured or on a bench, not getting regular playing time. Uh, he's the number one at Olympiacos. He will be the number one, and obviously, we hope that he won't um, go through those same struggles. Thankfully, those other players have resurrected their careers by this point. But you know, to not have to have that break, and hopefully, when he does make his move, be a starter somewhere. I think that's very smart on his end. Um, but yeah, I think outside of that, there's nothing set in stone currently. Obviously, big questions around Ayub Al-Kabi, David Carmo. Sounds like Fran Navarro will not be coming back. Daniel Podense, still not sure what's happening with him. Stevan Jovetic, even Youssef El Arabi, he won't, if he does come back, won't be on any sort of major role in the squad, but we still don't have clarity on whether he'll be retiring, whether he'll be signing somewhere else. And I think Yorgos Masuras as well is another one to look at. So a lot of players up in the air. A lot of those guys would play a major role for Olympiacos going forward. A couple of those guys would probably just be depth options. So it'll be interesting to see in the coming days and weeks what kind of when the dust settles, you know, what's it going to look like going forward, and what will we really need to be looking at in July as far as our squad holes?
About your first points that some people made were moved too early. You could argue that Rangers was a bit unlucky with how many injuries piled up, especially in his first season at Leverkusen. But yeah, as you said, way too much to think about, especially like we've been mentioning since the first episode that you've been on this show that half our squad is out of contract. Of course, as you said, Zolakis is, I think, we're just waiting on the official announcement, staying for hopefully the next 3 years. Uh, Fortunis is also set to sign, as far as I'm aware, but aside that addition, quote unquote, I'm in the same boat. I haven't the slightest clue on most of our squad, of course. About El Kabi, there have been rumors up and down. Even Transfermarkt is showing the Aston Villa rumor that, according to the people that listen to this show, that are Aston Villa fans, was complete and utter bullshit. But we'll see. As I said on Twitter, as I said earlier as well, I have no clue if this is a concrete statement, but people from Morocco did come out and say that Bologna want Ayoub El Kabi, and with the news from Fabrizio himself that Milan are looking to trigger Xerxes' release clause, those two stories adding up don't look the best for us, but we'll honestly see. I don't know what you have to add on that.
Yeah, I mean, touching on Ayulo Kabi, I think he's probably the biggest question mark remaining. Um, I think Bologna, obviously, we haven't seen anything concrete around that rumor. Compared to the Aston Villa rumor, I think makes a lot more sense. Bologna finished third in Serie A this season, which is very high for them. They'll be in the Champions League next year. So, I mean, it makes sense to me that they'd be looking for more squad depth in general. But even if they weren't playing in Europe next season, that's a club he would probably start for most seasons after the year that he had this past year. So I think it's just one of those positions where it's tough. If he was 25, 26, 27, I think Olympiacos throw the kitchen sink at him as far as a contract. But the fact that he is 30, I mean, you don't want to blow your bank on a guy like that because you don't know. I mean, that's one of the points I've seen a lot of people make is can he replicate these numbers? And obviously we have no reason to believe he can't, but again, he's 30, he'll be turning 31 next season. Who knows? I think if he takes the reasonable offer that we've given, which from what I've heard is basically Yusuf Al Arabi's contract, which is nearing 2 million a year, if I'm correct. For Olympiacos, that's a very solid contract. He'd be one of the highest earners in the squad. So I mean, obviously, if he takes that, great. It'll sting if he doesn't and he leaves on a free. But at the same time, you and I were talking about this privately earlier. You can't be upset or hold anything against him if he does decide to do that. Like we've been talking about, he's 30. This is probably his last opportunity to make a bigger move and go play in a top five league and go play Champions League. So for what he's given us, there wouldn't be any real complaints here, as much as it would suck to lose him for free. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. We'll probably know more on him about mid-month because I think from what I've heard, he'll be responding after his international window with Morocco. So we'll see, but I think that's honestly the biggest one. And then maybe another talking point would be David Carmo, with the news coming out yesterday that Sergio Conceição has been fired from Porto. So they'll be having a new manager, and he was probably the biggest reason why Carmo was playing for us. So I mean, what are your initial thoughts there on what that's going to look like and how that'll shape out?
Two things before that. Before we get completely railed about what we'll say, 99% of this video is just gonna be opinions, nothing more, nothing less. I do have a list up that a great friend on Twitter did send. Uh, it is on the comment of my post asking for uh, cases that we could honestly look after. So this is mostly going to be opinions, nothing more. About Masuras, it just slipped my brain completely. I don't trust Greek media para some slight cases at all, but from all I've seen, he's not getting priority as far as contracts go. Uh, it has been said that the priorities will be to keep our loanees and renew our contracts, but as far as I can see, he's not going to be one of the first, at least, that we're going to look at. So news on him will either come out early with an announcement from another team, or we'll probably have to wait until July. Now, the David Carmo thing. I do have one more thing to add, sadly, and that's that Pepe is probably finally leaving Porto, which opens up a spot for Carmo as a starter, sadly. Uh, Honestly, it's up to what we give Porto, whether that's renewing the loan with uh, a buyout that's around 12, 13, as I heard somewhere, or whether that's giving them, I have no clue if that article was concrete or not, whether that's giving them 8.5 for 50% of Carmos rights, whether that's renewing the loan with the same buyout clause. That's up to what we do and up to what Carmo wants mainly. Because I don't want to just jump players because we will take this one by one. Wolves did say, as it seems, that they will open negotiations given that Podence wants to stay here and Podence, while most of the players are out and about, he's here training and pushing for his move, which just shows everything you need to see if we hadn't already from the man taking photos on the Acropolis with the Olympiacos flag wrapped around him. Uh, so yeah, it's all a mess, honestly. Bar some cases like Ibora, for example, that we know will probably return to Levante. I've thanked Ibora, I've spoken about him in detail, and I will many times. So yeah, we'll honestly see. Not much more to say until we get into it one by one. Do talk for a bit. I'll go grab a chat.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of finishing up on a couple of players we just talked about. For Carmo, to Dennis's point, um, I think a lot of that will depend on the new manager as well, because obviously this is fully hinging on Porto and their desire to either keep him or not. Um, because I don't think that Olympiacos can or will trigger his current release clause. To my knowledge, it's in excess of 20 million. Uh, Obviously, that would break the Greek transfer record or break the Olympiacos transfer record, and he's probably not worth that. So I think not a lot of encouragement there with Pepe probably moving on and Sergio Conceição being fired. There's probably a very good chance that whoever the new manager that comes in will want to give David Carmo an opportunity in the first team. So I wouldn't anticipate that we do end up keeping him, as unfortunate as that is, but he's not worth what we have set for the current release clause, unfortunately. As great of a player as I think he is. Obviously, like you said, for Daniel Potense, I do have a lot of optimism there. Still don't know if he has a release clause in his loan agreement. He doesn't. I've seen. I feel like every other day I see a conflicting report that says he does, he doesn't, he does. Um, I think as long as they're not asking 20 million or something crazy for him, I think you give them whatever they ask for. I would anticipate it'll probably be under 10, probably like 5 to 7 million. Seems fair for a player that they don't want, who has expressed, obviously, as you stated, that he wants to play for Olympiacos. From everything, it seems we might even have a chance to maybe get him in the Ethniki at some point. Um, so that's super encouraging. And then touching on Masouras, kind of similar to my thought process on El Kabi, he obviously, if we can keep him for a reasonable contract, I absolutely think we should. He's a very versatile player. He's Greek, obviously, that contributes to our desire to have Greek core. Um, but he's pretty much the exact same age as Ayub Kabi. He might have a similar thought process as far as maybe he takes his chances on the continent. You know, there's some teams in Europe, thinking of like maybe FC Heidenheim or Twente and the Eredivisie and the Bundesliga just qualified for Europe after getting promoted. They'll definitely need squad depth. I could see him going somewhere like that on probably similar terms and maybe getting another chance to run at Europe on the continent, especially if Olympiacos are not prioritizing him contract wise. But yeah, I mean that one will kind of be bittersweet as well because I think a lot of people don't give him the kind of credit he deserves for the player that he's been for Olympiacos. I think in 5 or 10 years when he's gone, he'll be remembered a lot more fondly than I think he currently is. So obviously we wish him nothing but the best, but it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. Um, but yeah, as far as looking forward at transfers, potential squad holes that we know we'll have. I know you and I have already started talking about that. Maybe it's best to start with striker because I think regardless of whether or not Ayub El does resign, we're going to need to sign at least one more with Fran Navarro going back to Porto.
Uh, I do want to touch on one thing. I'm not that pessimistic about Carmo personally, not necessarily for a permanent deal, but I do believe that if, of course, as I said, all depends on him wanting to be here as well, because he's been 6 months. Like, we can't lie, he cemented himself as one of the stars of the team. So if he wants to stay here, I am a bit optimistic for maybe another loan, but we'll see. Now about Masuras, of course. Bochum has been the main name that's been heard. Honestly, maybe since January, uh, or was it even last summer that they tried to get him? I don't really remember.
I think that's been a lasting rumor, and that's one of those ones where I feel like if he made that move, for some reason, maybe this is just a me thing. I feel like Yorgos Masuras has Germany written all over his face as far as playing there at some point. That's another one that it would be a good fit, but um, they're playing in the Zweite Bundesliga, if I'm not mistaken.
They
Are they in the
they
top flight?
they came back from that 3-0, won
Oh, that's right.
3-0.
That was the game with Solis. You're right. That would be a good move. Obviously, I think if he could get himself into a team that's playing in Europe, that would probably be preferable. But if he wants to play in a top five league and nobody else is giving him interest, um, he would get to play in the Bundesliga. That you know, Bochum would be fighting for relegation, so I don't know how much fun he would have there. But yeah, I mean that seems like a sensible transfer. And like you said, I think that rumor's been around for a while, and it just seems like it fits him for some reason.
Yeah, I honestly I couldn't describe it more perfectly that Masuras has Germany written all over him. So we'll see. I will actually take it one by one because it is way easier in my head. Of course, we mentioned Jolakis staying, signing the 3-year deal, and we're getting to the first very interesting case already, which is, of course, Alexandros Paschalakis. Dividing opinions.
I hope we keep him. And I just want to say, you probably don't know this about me because this is all before you and I met up. Um, I used to hate Alexandros Paskalakis when he played at PAOK. I thought he was the most bird-brained, eccentric goalkeeper I had ever seen. I don't know if you remember that game against Benfica in the playoffs where he pretty much single-handedly knocked PAOK out of their first ever Champions League, and they still haven't made it back there. Clearly a talented keeper, always has been, but I used to think he was just the worst. That being said, my opinion on him has done a complete 180 since he's joined Olympiacos. I think I can't remember him ever really having an awful game for us. Even last season when our team was terrible, I don't think he was probably one of the few players who seemed like every game gave his best and was probably one of our better performers. I remember that game against Freiburg last year where we almost, shithoused a win and he made about 15 saves and we still ended up drawing with the goal in the last stoppage time or whatever that was. But he's been great for us when we've needed him. I think he would be a great backup. Obviously, he's 34 now, 35, older player, 35. Not at a point in his career where I think he's going to be your normal starter, but to have him as a backup behind Kostas Solakis, I think that is incredible cover for a team like Olympiacos. I think that he'd be a good locker room guy. Good to have behind Solakis as a mentor, as a more experienced goalkeeper who's been here before and done this both in Greece and in Europe. So personally, as somebody who used to hate Alexandros Paskalakis, I hope we keep him. But again, that'll probably come down to whatever role that he decides he wants. If he's wanting to go be a starter somewhere for, maybe a bottom half team, maybe like a Pasquianina, he could go back home, or, one of the teams coming up, then that's for him to decide. But I think definitely if he wants to come back and be our backup on a reduced contract, I'm all for keeping him.
I can proudly say that I am one of the very few greats that when this rumor started going around with Vatslik, I'm pretty sure it was, leaving, going to Huddersfield, and Paskalakis coming in to replace him. I was one of the few that was happy. uh, Mostly because, as much as I personally despise the guy as well, I had that feeling that if he came into a healthier locker room, God knows the mess that last season would have been when that rumor came out. I had a feeling that we'd see the best of Pascalakis that we'd seen in some years, which we did last season especially. The main bad game that I can think uh, for Pascalakis is the game that, of course, set him out completely, which is the 1-4 against Maccabi this year. Other than that, not really any bad games. So, of course, I'd keep him as well. As a backup, obviously.
I mean, I think it would be harsh to blame the 1-4 on him. All of the goals that they scored were inside the box. I mean, I think a lot of the 1-4 came down to some idiotic defending. Um, and I thought I remembered after that game he had like an injury or something, and that was the reason why Tsolaki started the second leg. Um, Obviously, again, I think Tsolakis is the clear number one. If Paskalakis is coming back, it is to be the backup. Um, but yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. That's one of those ones I think like Masuras, where it's like it's great if we can keep him, but if not, I mean, I don't think it's going to be the end of the world for us. Obviously, we have Angelo Sina who's coming up. He might be too young to get any first team looks yet. Um, Botis, we have a few keepers in the pipeline, and obviously it sounds like we're signing Kifisi as goalkeeper as well, or looking to sign him. So we'll have some depth there, but yeah, I mean, it would be nice to have him, and like we both said, he's changed our minds a lot, and I think he'd be a good piece to have.
You got there before me. We are looking to sign Anagностopoulos Kifisias keeper as a third choice, which would probably mean that Papadopoulos will go out on loan, I guess. Uh, Speaking of Botis, I've said it, I'll say it as much as I can. That kid will have an incredible career, and I truly, truly was very happy when we got him from Inter. Moving on, we did talk about Carmo, and moving on to a guy that has also, I think there is very few players in this squad looking at it now that haven't divided the entire Olympiacos fan base. And the next one is one that I've argued about with my own father a bunch of times, and that's Andreas Doi. What's your opinion on
I mean, I think we should keep him. I think when he has appeared for us, obviously he's a very young player. I think for his age, he has performed incredibly well for Olympiacos when he has played. I think back to, there were a number of games last season when we were just getting shredded every match, where he would be one of the few players that you at least looked at and had some hope for. He didn't always play the best, but I mean, again, he's a teenager. This season, played a lot less because we had more squad depth and we had better players.
it? Not a
I think
center back as well.
yeah, I mean, he can play center back and he can play in midfield, which is again having players who have that versatility. I think is huge. Um, I think about the match against Fenerbahce. I think honestly, had Panos Retzos been available, that game might have gone differently because Andreas Ndoye bullied Edin Dzeko out of that game. Bullied him. And Edin Dzeko, as everybody knows, is 6'4", big burly. I mean, we've seen him bully Piqué and, all these great players around Europe during his career. Couldn't do it against Andreas Ricardo Ndoye. So I think that's another one. I would love to keep him for an extended period of time. I think that he's a player that can be a great depth option for the next couple of years and could still develop into a very good starter, especially at the Super League level, but maybe even for Europe. So I think I don't think we're going to get through any player that's not divisive to some extent with Olympiacos fans. I think that's just the nature of our fan base. But I like him. I think he should stay. I hope that he chooses Greece over Albania. I think he could be a guy that would help the Ethniki as well. But that's
He's
just my
been
opinion.
called up already.
Has he played for us yet though?
He got called up now for the friendlies. I don't know what the friendlies are, to be honest.
But
But he's in the squad.
he's not cap tied to us until I want to say he makes 3 appearances. So he could still choose Albania if he doesn't get the playing time he wants or something like that. Similar to like how we saw with Angelo Sina, that one broke my heart because I'm like I would have loved to see him play for Greece, but it seems like
Can you
he's
blame the
set
guy?
No, oh no, I mean to be fair, goalkeeper is one of the positions that I think is going to be very hard to get into the Ethniki for the next 10 years. I think currently Kostas Tolakis still isn't the undisputed number one because Odysseas has always been great for us and he hasn't started performing poorly yet. I think if he didn't play the way he played against Georgia, we won't even make it to penalties. So I mean I think he's still a number one, and then obviously after that it's Tolakis. So for Angelo Sina, I mean he will probably be starting for Albania and here in the next couple of years if he maintains his trajectory and stays healthy. But yeah, back to Ndoye. I hope that he plays for us and gets tied to us and is locked down as an Ethniki player because he was one of the ones that I have seen over the past couple of years since he came up that there's always been those rumors on he's eligible for both. Which one is he going to choose? He's obviously not a very outspoken individual, so hopefully that stays. I honestly have not been paying attention to the Ethniki for these friendlies because after March, I'm just kind of done with them for a little bit, and obviously now I'm just still drunk on this Olympiacos success, so that hasn't been on the front of my mind.
I've been done with them for a while now. But with Doi choosing us and openly saying that he wants to play and getting called up for the friendlies, I don't think there is a chance he'll switch back. But with this SNG, you never know. So I don't blame you for having your doubts. Uh, I think it's more of an unpopular opinion, but I would look to keep him as a backup as well, and I would look to do what I've been preaching for since last year, since last summer, and convert him back to the sixth position, which we desperately need. I would look to give him the chance in preseason to play in midfield, given now that some squad players are gone, for example, like Joao Carvalho and stuff. Uh, just see what happens. If an offer comes in, it's like 6 to 8 million and we get a chance to cash in on him. We of course should cash in on him, but in general, I would look to keep him as well. Uh, moving on to a very confusing case for me at least, and a case that loved the team incredibly much, and I'm pretty sure he has a contract until 2027. I think so. No, okay, 2025. And that's Julian Biancon. Julian Biancon, of course, who I've publicly given credit for. I have no clue what fireworks are. Julian Biancon, who I've publicly given credit for joining the academy on their youth league wing, being there in every European match since Maccabi, I'm pretty sure, despite, of course, not being on the list and eligible to play, ever since Medilibar played, ever since Medilibar came in, he hasn't touched the field, I'm pretty sure, but he's still there. Every
Didn't
single
he
moment.
play? Didn't he play? I believe he started against Pauk when we won after. Was that after the Fenerbahce tie when we beat them 2-1 at home? I want to say that Biancone played that game.
I will check after while you give your opinion, but he's not played as much as he did, is my point, yet he's still been there every single time for the team. So again, I feel like I'll say this a lot and I feel like it's gonna be an unpopular opinion 90% of the time, but he's 24, can cover pretty sure both fullback positions as well, if I'm not that mistaken. Unless an offer his value is 3 million, unless an offer that doubles that comes in, I'd keep him, honestly.
Same as well. I mean, as far as I'm aware, he's on a pretty reasonable contract. Um, and then also, like you said, the versatility in defense. Hopefully, we've learned our lesson from having to start 38-year-old Rafinha at left back against City in the Champions League. That it absolutely benefits your squad to have guys who can play multiple positions. When he has played, obviously he's not the greatest player, but I think that he is talented enough to play for Olympiacos, especially in the Super League. Um, so I agree. I think given the fact as well, another thing that a lot of people probably don't consider because of the format change, we have 2 extra European matches next season for a total of 8 in the group stages of the Europa League. So having a larger squad, not obviously anything crazy, but a few more players who can cover a couple of positions like Biancone, like Ndoye, I think it's a no-brainer to keep them. And then, like you said, obviously this guy has shown a great level of commitment and passion for our team, despite not having a major role in the squad. I think those are good guys to have around, even if they don't play a major role for you on the field. Having that sort of positivity in your locker room is huge. So I agree with you there. I definitely think we should try to keep him, especially because again he's not on expensive terms. So why would you not if he's willing to stay?
And I think it's more than clear that he is willing to stay. And you are correct, he did start that victory against PAOK, but honestly, I don't think he's played ever since. Uh, I will skip people like Rechos because I think it's self-evident that it's it's a blind choice to be kept. Uh, I'll also skip people like Vezo because I think we both know that he's good. I've seen some people wanting to keep him, and I don't know what they've said. Uh, Now, another person that is a blind keep for me, but I don't know what's happening with him because I haven't heard a lot. Of course, he was there in the celebrations, uh, and I think he's provided more than enough proof that he can be the future of this team's defense, and that's Nelson Abbey. Nelson Abbey. I still don't know how that name is pronounced, to be honest with you.
I
Uh,
think it's Abby.
Abbey, yeah. An absolute monster in the back every time he played. Am I back? I am back.
Yep, I got
Uh,
you.
Something I love is that he's extremely outspoken. That some people don't like that, but as I said, as long as you're not an asshole, you need to be fiery on the pitch and maybe a bit off it as well. Still remember that story from he posted. I'm not sure about that from the yellow he'd gotten at the game here, and I did say that that yellow was a joke, and then he went on to like my story. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
uh,
he's also very young. That's
he's
another one.
20. He's
He's
younger
20.
than he's my age.
Yeah, I mean, he's younger than Zolakis, and we all see him as like our next big thing as a young player. Um, that's another one as well. Why would you not keep him? And like you said, with Biancone, with Ndoye, why would you not keep him if you're not getting offers for him? And if he wants to stay, which like those other guys, he seems like he does. Um, even to have cover for you know Europe in the league as well, just with fixture congestion. I think that it's good to have players like that who aren't going to be the most talented, but they they care a lot. I think that that matters for a lot more than people give credit for. Is guys who actually want to be there and want to play. That's the biggest reason why I think it's great that we're starting to have more Greeks in the squad because Greek guys are more likely to give a shit about the badge rather than the paycheck or the name on their back. But yeah, I mean, I think that that's another no brainer. He's also I don't know what contract he's on. I'm sure he's on cheap terms. You know, probably under 500,000 a year if I had to guess. But that's just another one in my opinion. It's a no brainer unless there's a real reason for him to leave. Um, keep him around.
Can't see the terms of his contract, but he is here till 26. So I think that makes it more of a no-brainer on why he should be kept. I think Ortega doesn't need to really be discussed. I think we both agree that he's going to have even better of a year than he had, especially the second half next year. Now, Richards. Richards is a person I would like for us to keep at least on loan one more year to give him a bit more game time than he had this year. Of course, he came back, I'm pretty sure, around January from his injury. Uh, and I honestly think he can give Ortega some major competition and with the Atromitos left back that we are looking to sign, which I can't remember the name for the life of me, the 23-year-old Greek. I think that would be a very good trio in the left back position, if possible, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any real possibility for him to get significant playing time at Forest next season. Um, so I don't see why they wouldn't want to loan him back out to us or sell him to us on a cheap deal. I mean, if we can get him for 1 or 2 million or something like that, absolutely sign him permanently. I agree with you there. When I saw him play for us, I was always impressed. He's another one of those guys where he will play with a lot of passion, and you can tell he goes out there and you know he's going to give you everything and cover every blade of grass. He injured himself in 45 minutes against Villa, and I genuinely think that was because he was playing that hard in that first leg. Uh, after Ortega went off. So I really like him. I think that we should try to keep him. Like you said, the loan is probably more likely because I could see Forest wanting to hold out to see if they can get more for him down the road. But if we could get him cheaply on a permanent basis, I think that would be a great signing.
Yep, couldn't agree more, honestly. Uh, Rodinei is a no-brainer as well. Doesn't even need to be discussed. Uh, I don't know what you have on Kini. I think he's gone. I'm not that sure.
I th- I think that was he not on a 1+1?
Uh, Let me actually check. I think he had uh, the same terms as Ibora. No, his contract's up this year.
Hmm. I mean, I would keep him if he wants to come back. I would probably guess that we would want to get a better deal on his contract. Just coming from Spain, he's probably making close to 1 million. Just based on what I know from our transfer policy. But I don't know for sure what he makes. I think he would be good to bring back if he wants to come back and be like the backup role that he's been this season. He's another one of those guys who can play on both sides, and he down the stretch, despite my stupid comments, played great. He even played really well in the final and set up the opportunity for El Kabi's goal. So if we can keep him, if he wants to come back, and his contract terms are reasonable for us financially, absolutely. Obviously, he'd probably be the first. I mean, the backup behind Rodinei at right back, but he can cover left as well. Um, so he's made a fan out of me. I can't say anything bad about him anymore.
If, of course, we get better terms on his contract and if he plays less than he did this year and in his proper position, which, as you said, is a right back, then I'd keep him. Otherwise, I think I'd just let him go, look for something younger and maybe even Greek as well. I've always shouted for Saliakas, but now that Sempoli is in the first division, I think that's possible. Uh, as of course, don't know if he'll stay, but it's a no-brainer when it comes to a keep or a sell, unless like a crazy offer of 30, 40 million comes in.
Or unless he just decides that an offer does come in and he's not going to play for us at that point, we're probably tied to just selling him. But
Yeah,
like you said,
let's not Kamara it this time.
oh my, I
Let's not.
hope not. Speaking of good riddance, just to briefly touch on
I'll
that, but
get to him. He's two players down. I'll get to him eventually.
yeah, for Edse, you said 30 to 40. I think we should be pushing for 50 for that guy because genuinely, he's going to be starting for our Champions League side soon. Like he is that sort of player. The fact that we were able to get our hands on him for as little as we did is incredible because he's a fantastic player. Um, but yeah, I mean, if he wants to stay, absolutely keep him and don't accept any offer that isn't breaking a Greek transfer record. I think at an absolute minimum we should be trying to get 30 for him, but I think closer to 50 probably is what he's worth.
The only team that I'm scared of course, getting him is Atletico with all the midfielders that are leaving this year and with the craze that apparently Diego Simeone has for Santiago Ese and that the man wanted to get him even while he was in Argentina, as far as I have learned recently. So we should definitely be pushing for at least 30 from a team like Atletico. Uh, to move on now, Iborra, of course, probably on his way back to Levante. Nothing other to say than thank you for, especially for the last few months. Just an absolute warrior. Anything? Do you have anything to say on?
He's another guy that proved me wrong because first half of the season I thought that he was just the slowest, most useless player, but he wasn't being used correctly. Under Mendilibar, he was completely different, and like you said, down the stretch of the season, I don't think we win the Conference League without him and his contributions. So absolutely, going back to his original club in Levante makes a lot of sense. They're obviously struggling right now, so why would he not want to go back and help them and finish his career there? So best of luck to him, and thank you for everything you did. That's all. That's all we can say.
I've never been so happy to be embarrassed from a player. Muddy, as you said, good fucking Raiders. Absolutely fuck right off. I've had a small interaction with Ari from the people over at Gate 7 who said that on one hand, for the memories he's given us, you kind of feel bad and it's a shame. On the other, fuck off to Pauk probably. That's the worst part. That he's 99% going to Pauk, as it seems, and may even be announced by the end of next week. So
I hope so. That's where he belongs. All I
yeah,
will say about a player like that, he's incredibly talented, but he spent the past 2.5, 3 years pouting about the fact that he has not gotten the bigger move he thinks he deserves. And in that time, you've had players like Ibora, like Eze, even guys like Alexandropoulos come in and outperform him and take his spot, which is completely deserved. So I'm glad to see him go. It's another one like with Huang, who good riddance. Like you're very talented clearly, but you have the worst mentality ever. And doesn't matter how good you are on the pitch if you're just gonna sulk and mope and think that you're above this. Go play for Red Star. Go play for PAOK. Obviously, I have much better opinions on Crvena Zvezda, but Serbian league versus the Greek league, I think we've seen in Europe this season which one is more competitive, both domestically and in Europe. So yeah, go enjoy your bigger clubs and your bigger moves. That's what you get.
I don't know which one I hate more, honestly. Of course, Orta, again, no brainer if we can buy him. Then it looks like we will do everything possible to get him. He's shown how much he wants to stay here. He said it publicly multiple times. Uh, Chiquinho will hopefully be here till 2027, as his contract states. I haven't hoped for a player to be here till he's 32 more in my life, I think. Uh, and then is a player you just mentioned and who I want to keep so badly, but most want to go, and that's Alexandropoulos.
I don't understand why anybody would want to get rid of him. I've seen this theory kind of floated around on Twitter that he's been playing so sparingly because we're trying to get his release clause lowered from Sporting. Um, I mean, aside the fact of what he is on the pitch, I just want to keep him because he came from Panathinaikos and he came and won a European with us. I I want to keep him just for that, but he is also a very decent squad player. He plays with a lot of passion for us. Like I've said that multiple times throughout this conversation. Guys who play like they care. I want those guys in our squad, and he definitely fits that. And you know, I saw uh, Pano from Super Greek after we won the final. This is just a random aside. It was a picture of Paskalakis and Alexandropoulos, and he's like, "When you do nothing for the group project, but you get an A, I want to make sure that everybody knows we do not have this European journey if it is not for that goal against Genk from Alexandropoulos. He started all of this, so didn't play much of a role after that, but definitely do not forget what he did for us, as well as the fact that he did score against Panathinaikos this season, which I also love. So I absolutely want to keep him, and if we can get a reasonable deal with Sporting, to my knowledge, his release clause is I don't think it's even above 5 million. So I think we should try to keep him if we can.
If I didn't get caught a fool as much as I did with the whole Podence release clause, I'm pretty sure it's four. I would try and get him for two, to be honest, like around one or two. But yeah, and I'll focus on and double down on what you said again, which is the passion he's shown for this club. It's clear that he's loved around the squad. It's clear that he's respected despite him being 22. It's clear that people want him here, and it's clear that he does want to be here. So, aside, of course, all the Panathinaikos stuff, solely for that, I want to keep him as well. But I honestly don't see why he should. Plus, he's one of the very few Greeks that won't complain if he doesn't get game time. So, yeah, Fortunis renewed, as we said, Carvalho on Fortunis. I just want to hear one more person that called him lazy, not good enough, and anything. I want them to come out of their caves one more time and speak. Once, only once.
He's not good enough to captain the Ethniki, but Tassos Bakasetas, Mister scores every penalty but the one we need to qualify for a tournament. Had the worst game of any Ethniki captain I think I have ever seen in my entire life against Georgia. Played 120 minutes. He might have touched the ball 10 times. I think those takes are mostly from Panathinaikos fans. I think they're incredibly lazy takes. Speaking of laziness, clearly this season he's shown coming off of two major knee injuries on both of his legs. He's done ligaments in both knees. And for some players, that can be a career-ending injury. He's come back from both of them both times. And at 31 years of age, still had 30 goal contributions this season. I think he had 11 goals, 19 assists across all competitions. As a midfielder, I absolutely he's one of those guys along with El Kabi if he wants it that I'm like lifetime contract, statue outside the stadium when he's retired. There's no anybody who has an issue with Kostas Fortounis and questions his professionalism, his talent, and his value to any football team does not know what they're talking about. That's all I have to say on that.
And they can unfollow this show freely. I don't want people like that on my brand. Uh, as we said, Carvalho fucked off, thankfully. Masur, as we talked about. I want to touch on Cabral a little bit because there has been so much that we may keep him one more year. I haven't disagreed with a lot more in my life because the same people with a short-term memory from Alexandropoulos and Fortounis forget that in the B team we have a very talented young winger that we brought in last summer that under Medilibar would do wonders, in my opinion, as a backup, of course, and that's Ivan Brinic. So I don't see a single reason to keep Giovanni Cabral while Brinic is in the team with a long-term contract.
Well, and we also even talking about Brinic, you're having guys like Kostulas. I know he usually plays as a striker. He can play out wide. Papa Canelos usually plays centrally, but again, as a young player, he could always fill in for that position if we needed him to. Um, that's one of those guys where it's like he seems like he's just a surplus to requirements. Um, like, yeah, I don't understand why we would bring him back. I wouldn't be, I guess, vehemently angry if we do, as long as he's not like playing any major squad role. But he absolutely should not be taking away minutes from younger players, especially when he's on loan because he's not our player. So yeah, I agree with you there. That one does not make a lot of sense to me. He hasn't really impressed in the minutes he has gotten this season. So yeah, I don't get that one.
Of course, Brinic we just mentioned, Podence we talked about. I think we both agree on Zelson being kept. Right? Okay. Uh, do you want to say anything?
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I mean,
Like,
especially if Masuras leaves, we absolutely need a guy like Justin Martins. He's another one who it seemed like when he plays for us, he gives everything. He's scored some good goals for us. He got the second goal against Pauk, which ended up being the winner in that playoff match we mentioned earlier, Biancone. And he can play basically wing, attacking midfield, opposite wing. He can fill into any of those slots. So that's another one. Having a guy that can play multiple positions, I absolutely think we should keep him.
And again, a player that didn't have a preseason with us, so imagine what he can do with a
Absolutely.
preseason, staying fit and healthy. Navarro, as you said, probably not coming back. El Cabi we talked about, and the two players that we haven't touched on that, in my opinion, should, very different cases, but in my opinion, should both be here. Jovetic, who doesn't know yet, he said publicly that he will speak with Olympiacos about his future. I do think we'll offer him another contract. Not sure. I do hope we offer him another contract because, as calling back to the guys from Viola Nation, I haven't seen a more clutch player in recent years. Maybe Hassan. Maybe Hassan.
Clutch and class as well. I mean, I think he's a great personality to have around. Again, for a guy like him who's played for Manchester City, who's played for Fiorentina and some big leagues around the world in Europe, to come in and just accept the role of he's not going to start every game. He might be an impact sub. Sometimes he might not be in the squad, but he's always there with a smile on his face. And when he does play, he contributes. So I hope that we are able to hold on to him. He's a player that I think any club wants him around, just even because of the kind of personality and experience that he has. So yeah, total agreement with you there. And then that leads us into the last player on the list, which is Youssef El Arabi. I'll let you start with that one.
You're forgetting someone. You're forgetting someone that has come up very recently and that I've defended publicly, and that, of course, a man that we both consider very close friends now, and a man that I had the pleasure of watching us lift the European title with Fetalos, of course. The people on Twitter will know him, uh, and I have talked about, and that's Al Qasim Ba. Al
I
Qasim Ba.
yeah, I wasn't thinking about him as far as the senior squad because he's mostly been with the B team. But yes, I think he's a guy that hasn't been utilized enough with the senior side. My only thing with him is how does he take away time from Costulas? Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we probably prioritize Costulas getting some first team minutes over Al Simba. But I mean, I'll let you give your opinion on that. I definitely think that he could be kept around and used as cover up front, and I think he's absolutely earned that and probably should have this season. Uh, but with Costulas coming in, depending on who else you bring in as a striker, it might be one of those cases where maybe a loan out works better for him, because I don't think I would want a foreign player taking precedence over a guy like Costulas, who I want to see in the first team as soon as possible.
I agree with you, even though I'd personally give him the precision as well. And if I trust anyone to utilize young players, it would be Medilibar, with Silaidopoulos, of course. Uh, Loan him. Like the reports have been that he will be sold or being let go or anything like that. And usually, with the most recent example being Svetozar Markovic, that is now Partizan's captain, being let go for free from the B team. Usually it comes to bite us in the ass somehow. At least loan him, give him the cup games, give him something. Don't just let him go, which is my opinion at least.
Well, I think in general, right? This doesn't even have to do with him specifically. You should always be trying to get something in return, even for the players that you don't have a use for. That's just running your club well. Svetozar Markovic is definitely one that I think we're going to regret for a long time. Um, but loan him out to Atromitos, maybe even Aris, as we've kind of talked about a little bit. They might lose Loren Moron this year because of the season that he had. Maybe they need a striker. I definitely think we could pursue some different avenues with him as far as not selling him entirely. Um, but yeah, I mean that one we'll see what happens. A lot of those guys in the B team kind of just get sent there to die, which is unfortunate. But yeah, we'll see what happens with that. Hopefully, we've learned from previous mistakes.
And we'll touch on Moral in a bit. Uh, but to finish the list before we get into the names that we've mentioned and that have been told to me, of course, as we said, Giuseppe Larabe. I think it's a perfect time to just let him do whatever he wants. Does he want to return to Morocco? Let him return to Morocco. Does he want to retire? Let him retire and perhaps even give him a spot in the backroom stuff. Like I think we should really do with Mathieu Valbuena. I don't know what he'll do. I don't know if Mathieu will continue to play, but for now, he is a free agent, as far as I know. He has left Apollon. So we really need to look at those two and see what they'll do and what we can do with them, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, for Al Arabi, I think he should retire. And that's not me saying that I don't want to see him play anymore. My thing is, this is probably the last season where he's ever going to contribute to a team in a meaningful way, right? Unless he goes back to like Morocco and he's just playing at a much lower level. He's 37, right? He was already a club legend before the season started. Even more so now that he was participating in and he scored goals along this European campaign. Um, leave on a high. You were on the pitch when we won our first European trophy. To me, it just seems like a perfect time. And then, like you said, absolutely keep him around, like we've done with guys like Avram, right? Have him on pitch side as like an assistant or whatever it is, because he's another one of those players, especially with a guy like Kostulas coming up. That's a great mentor opportunity for some of our young players playing in the same or a similar position. So I hope that we keep him in some sense. I really think that for him, it's probably just best to retire now and transition to the back room. But I mean, hey, if he wants to come back on a super cheap contract and be like our fourth choice striker, he's another one of those guys where I'm like, if he wants to play for us, I think we try to make it work as long as he's not unreasonable with his wage demands.
As I said, it's just letting him do what he wants, honestly. Uh, Now, let's run through a couple of names and then just call it because I had to be up for a doctor's appointment relatively early as well. So I think the main names that before I get onto the list, the main names that we should talk about is of course Mathieu Valbuena, as I mentioned, and Laurent Moron. I don't know what your opinion is on both. Uh, Go.
Valbuena as a player, I mean, again, I think if we want to bring him back, it would have to be on a very, very small contract. Like I just mentioned with El Arabi, it would literally have to be like he's our fourth choice because I don't think that he has that much left as far as his physical ability, and being that he's an attack-minded player, losing your legs does tend to affect you when you're at a certain level. So I would love to bring him back in like a assistant coaching or youth coaching opportunity. But if we're talking about as a player, like with El Arabi, very low down on the pecking order, and probably just as a backroom guy, like Avram was in his last few years. Having him around was a positive. For
Don't forget
Moron,
that Valbuena has opened the academy as well in Reading. The Valbuena Academy.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think he has a lot of upside for us, whether we bring him back as a player or not. So I think he should be around the club regardless. Um, for Moron, he's obviously a very good player for Greek league standards. He had a great year this season with Aris. My only apprehension with him is when we've brought in players, strikers specifically, from other Greek teams that had great seasons. Look at Pinakas, look at Manos, look at Abubakar Kamara, who came from Aris as well. I worry that he might come here and be the next Miguel Angel Guerrero. In that case, we should just give those opportunities to a guy like Costulas, to a guy like Ba. So I think any approach for him should have to entirely depend on it being a smoking deal from Addis. Like I don't think we should be paying anywhere over $1 million for him if we do make a move. Probably significantly under that, but I can't see Addis wanting to sell him for such a low rate considering the season he had. So that one to me is like I'm not really sure on. You probably want to share your thoughts there as well.
I don't have much more to say other than I take him with El Capilius, given that we will need to look for two strikers if Juper Capi decides to go. He is a well-known option and he's a cheap option that big teams will for sure not go after. And with Aris probably needing to sell him because of funds, because they once again didn't make Europe, and his contract is for their standards quite big. I think that if we wanted to, we could get him on a cheap. But I don't know. As I said, I'd only get him if Ayub El Kadi leaves. Now, the names that have been given to me are a few, and all of them are expiring contracts. So that's something to keep in mind. And the list did start with Sergi Cardona from Las Palmas, the 24-year-old left back that is gonna, that according to Transfermarkt at least, will not renew his contract with Las Palmas. As far as I can see, in La Liga he has 35 games, 1 goal and 2 assists, and in the Copa del Rey he has 1 game. His value is 6 million as far as Transfermarkt states. I should have looked up more stats about him because I don't know the guy really well. But honestly, with the few games I've seen of him, if Richards leave, I think it's more or less a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not familiar with him at all, but what you just described, I mean, we've had luck recently with players who come from Spain. The fact that he played regularly last season and could provide cover there. My only thing is like, yeah, Richards would have to be out. I think I'd prioritize Richards just because we've seen him and we know what he brings. But I mean, if we do lose him back to Forest or he doesn't want to come back on loan, um, players like that sounds like a great option for us, especially on the free, because even if he doesn't pan out, he was free. So that's a very low risk. And from what it sounds like, he would be high upside because has a pretty decent value. He's pretty young and he played in Spain.
Exactly, it's not like he's a veteran. He's 24 years old, turning 25 in July. So yeah, next player that was given to me as a realistic option is a player that I have seen some headlines of, and the player that, of course, most of us know as a comment was left from Football Manager, and that's Ibrahima Sissoko, the CDM from Strasbourg. Uh, 26, also gonna live on a free, 27 games, 1 assist in the league, and 4 games, 2 assists in the cup. Starting 11, around 53% in the league and 100 uh, in the cup. I'm of course much more familiar with him I than I was with Sergio Cardona, and I think if uh, Danny Garcia doesn't end up signing, I honestly think I would wanted him to seriously look at him.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned with Garcia, obviously he'd be a very good player for us, but he's also 35. So that's the thing for me. I'm always more open to younger players if we can get them. So again, I'm not crazy familiar with either of them, but for a guy who's 26, playing in a position that we desperately need players, especially not knowing if Alexandropoulos will be back. Um, I honestly, between the two, I would probably say go for him if it's between him and Garcia, just because he's so much younger. But that personally, that's just me. I tend to err on wanting younger players in our squad rather than the retirement players from the bigger leagues. But that's just my own personal take.
Yeah, yeah, I don't necessarily disagree. Just honestly more familiar with Danny Garcia, and given that we are bringing up younger players of our own, and anti-Ibora choice wouldn't really be the worst case scenario, but only time will tell. The next player that was mentioned, apparently his contract is ending next year, so I'll just skip over him. And I thought I checked and I saw 2024. It was Christian Kwame, who of course we are now all familiar with. But yeah, his contract is ending next year, so I'll skip over that. Moving on to a player that the team has wanted for, I think, 3 years now. Uh, and that's Nemanja Radonic, who is now playing in Mallorca and will leave at the end of the season. Of course, 2028, left winger, played 11 games in La Liga, played 3 in the Copa del Rey this season, played 10 in the Serie A, of course, starting the season over in Italy and scoring 3, and playing 1 and assisting 1 in the Cup. Now, of course, he's been rumored to return to Red Star at the end of the season. Uh, but of course, as I said, the club has looked at him for, I honestly I think since 2021, that rumor has been floating around. So again, depending on other player circumstances like Podenes, Martins, as I said, players like how players like Papacanelos will perform. I think it once again depends.
He's also I think about him. He can play all up and down the left flank. He can play left back as well. He did that for Red Star a lot. He's a player that I am a bit more familiar with. So I mean, he probably will go back to Red Star. That seems like it makes more sense
He can also
because he,
play as the nine, as far as I am aware.
yeah, I mean, he's a very versatile player. And very talented, very athletic. If we could get him somehow, some way, I would absolutely go for that. But given that Red Star and that sort of club culture is very similar to Olympiacos, it would probably be very difficult for us to win that battle against them. And we all know they'll probably be interested in him with his contract running out. But he would be a great piece if somehow we could get him. He's definitely somebody that I've been a fan of for back to when he was with Red Star.
Yeah, I agree with you, but as I said, because of course, squad roles play a part, as always. It really depends on what other players do. Now we go on to a player that I would have asked a good friend of mine who is from Canada, but you may be also familiar with, given you have much more of a contact with the MLS than I do. And that is the 27-year-old center back Miles Robinson from FC Cincinnati. Does that ring any bells?
Yes, I don't know if he would be the best move for us. Like, I could see him coming in and being very similar to like a Ruben Vezo. I mean, I don't really rate him that much. He's kind of one of those center backs. A lot of like American and Canadian players that come through in that position, they're just kind of a master of none. They're not really physically dominant. They're not crazy good on the ball. They're not crazy good at defending. They're just kind of all right at everything. Um, so personally, I probably wouldn't be too high on that one if that really is a rumor. But I mean, I guess as a squad rule, if that's serious.
Again, as I said, none of these are rumors. before anyone just flames me or us. These are just opinions that have been shared with the show, and I wanted to share here. Uh, One last name that was mentioned. Let me actually check the list again. Uh, yes, one last name that was mentioned is a name we are also all very familiar with, and that is out of contract, and that is Michi Batshuayi, that the team did want before he went to Fener, if I'm not that mistaken. I've always been very off and on with him.
He's not a guy who I think you really bring in to be your starting striker. Throughout his career, it doesn't matter where he's played, even in Turkey, right, this season with Fenerbahce, he's playing behind a 39-year-old Edin Dzeko, right? Like he's just that kind of player. He comes off the bench and he gives you a good 25, 30 minutes, 30 minutes as an impact sub. My thing with him, for the role that he plays, I don't think we're going to be able to get him on a contract that is reasonable. He's going to come in and he's going to be asking for well over 1 million, probably, possibly over 2 million. I don't think he's worth that. Talented player, but I think we need somebody like Ayub El Kabi, the similar sort of player, because the system that Mendilibar deploys is very dependent on the front line being active in their pressing. I don't see a player like Michi Batshuayi really fitting that mold, as well as the fact I don't think we'd be able to afford a player like that.
If we did actually look at him, I would want him as a backup. But as you said, then comes the contract that he probably wouldn't want to be a backup. But yeah, 24 goals and 4 assists in all competitions as a backup is not that bad, honestly. But yeah, just contract wise, I think that would be damn near impossible. The one thing we didn't actually look at is the loans, but we have so many loans that I do only want to mention two people that I do want to bring back and end it at that. And those would be uh, a guy we did bring in last summer, and that is the midfielder from Scotland, I'm pretty sure, Jordan Holmesgrove, that has been on loan to Estoril. I honestly am very intrigued because he played very well when he did. And I do want to at least give him a chance in this team. And the second one would be to bring him back and use him in his proper position and not ruin him like Pedro did when he had him. And that's Ajibu Kamara.
Yes, so especially for Agibu, he was one that I was really high on him when that first season he was with us. So I want to say that was 22. Um, I still think he has the potential to be a hell of a player in the right system. He's another guy. I think his player profile really fits Mendilibar's system. He's a number 10 who is very mobile, very active. He does a lot of running, and he can even play further back when we need him to. So I think absolutely he needs to get a look in on this team. Um, Jordan Holsgrove, I think that just because of the fact that we really probably our weakest position is the number 6, you have to give him an opportunity. There is the potential that his performances in Portugal don't really translate as well to Olympiacos. Think of a guy like Pepe. Um, but I think there's no reason not to have him for preseason and see what he can offer. But again, I don't see him being starting quality long term. So we still probably need to look for a player in that position. But for depth, absolutely, he should get at the very least a look.
Isn't he also like 21, 22?
I want to say he's like 23, 24. I don't know for certain. I don't think he's as young as like Abby and Salakis, but definitely still young enough that if he comes back and looks good, could be a player for us for a few seasons.
He's 24. But yeah, exactly like you said. To end this slowly, who's one player you'd bring in? Realistically,
Yes.
of course.
Um, you talking about who I mentioned earlier as far as a potential transfer?
Whoever you want to say.
Um, this is one I mentioned to you earlier when we were just talking before the show. I don't know how realistic it is. To me, it makes a lot of sense, but we'll see because he is coming from La Liga. Um, Obviously, Marinakis and the hierarchy at this club has been talking about wanting to have a Greek core going forward. I think they've shown efforts there as far as increasing you know the budgets for the youth team and those facilities, bringing back players like Retsos, keeping guys like Masuras and Fortunis, obviously. A guy I would honestly love us to take a look at this season, probably just as a loan, but if we could get him permanently, fantastic, would be Tassos Duvikas. He played, I want to say he got 35 appearances for Tauta this season, but most of them were as a substitute and he scored 7 goals in the league. He got one against Barcelona earlier in the year. I remember. I think it would work out very well for all parties if we got him on a loan next season. Give him more playing time. Obviously, he's still a relatively young player who's developing. Would give us, I think, the best striker in the Super League by a mile, and he's Greek. So that's obviously again, there's absolutely nothing to that as a rumor. Just me thinking about players who are out there that we could bring in, especially Greek players. I think he would be a great shout to at least look at and see what they would be willing to do as far as maybe a loan deal. But again, that's totally just from my head. So nobody get excited or take that seriously.
Yeah, as we said, period. And I'll end it with a player that I said to bring in since last season, where he left to go to Cardiff, and that's Manuel Siopis. As you said, their weakest position is the six, and I'd love to bring back a Greek that knows and loves the club, and that honestly can play no matter what he has.
I still have no idea why we let him go to begin with. Um, Absolutely, if we could get him back, that would be a great shout. Another guy sticking with Cardiff that I think would be a good squad piece if we could get him cheaply would be Dimitris Koutas. Now, I think he's a player, myself included, that a lot of fans of this club did not rate at all. We're glad to see him go because we just didn't think he was good enough, me at least. Um, he had a great season in the championship this year. Him and Siopis were arguably two of Cardiff's best players. Siopis for sure, but Gutas, he actually scored a few goals this season as well. I think that would be another one to look at as, hey, squad depth. He would absolutely do a job in the Super League for sure, and he's like 6'5", 6'6", so like that's always great to have at the back or on corners. I think there's a couple players for Cardiff that we could look at as possibly uh, being reasonable moves.
Yeah, I think that's about it, honestly, for for today. Of course, we'll get back into it like mid-month, maybe even late June, where more things have been announced and cleared up. Hopefully, most of the contracts will have been announced and cleared up. So yeah, thank you all once again for all your support to this show. And I'll see you in the next one.